but I was a nurse in the ER and in inpatient psychiatric units for like over 10 years. I know what it looks like to be clinically psychotic and have schizophrenia and different taboo, hot topic diagnoses. I know what that looks like pretty intimately, especially working in the ER. And it's hard not to notice the parallels of some of these things that happen in shamanism and are happening in my own life. I don't want to be insulting, especially, I feel like cultural appropriation is kind of like a big thing with this, and I unfortunately happen to be a white guy. So I don't know how to navigate these waters, because I don't want to like step on toes or anything like this is happening to me. I don't know what's happening.
Merging with simulator in 3, 2, 1.
But I feel like there's no one doing that with the more spiritual side of it. There's really not like, it's hard to go into that realm without being like a weird guru or some sort of like, I don't want to be the middleman between God, or between people and God, or between people and their spirituality. But at the same time, you kind of want to just like hold their hand a little bit, or be like, hey, this is how I did it. So it's definitely a fine line.
Yeah, man. And like, this is going to segue perfectly into sort of like what I really like wanted to talk to you about today, which I'm sure we're going to have 1,000 other things to talk about in different sidetracks. But, we had a panel discussion this past weekend, with a bunch of other psychedelic YouTubers, which was fantastic. And if people haven't watched that, I will put a link down in the description and go check that out. But yeah, so me and Jake were part of this panel. And one of the things that Jake brought up that, and Jake, like, I apologize, dude, because like, you've expressed this to me before, and like, I've told you like I wanted to sit down and talk to you about this because I've felt a similar way, but it's just been hard to like iron out the time and stuff like that. But yeah, man, so you brought up the fact that you've been having these psychedelic experiences and experiences away from psychedelics, these sort of religious mystical experiences that you feel like in a way is a sort of call to shamanism. And it was interesting because when you brought this up in the panel, it sort of enacted this giant discussion about like shamanism and merging the ancient traditions into the sort of Western world and this psychedelic renaissance that we're experiencing here in the Western world. So could you just kind of tell people, like, and you don't have to go into as much detail as you want to here, but like, just give people the brief rundown of like what's been going on with you, man. And also, like, I want you to know, like, I know you always preface this by saying like, I know I'm about to sound crazy, but dude, like, let's fucking let it rip. Let's be crazy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, dude, that was rough, actually, because like, I didn't sleep at all the night before that panel for like for a few reasons, but like like I slept 2 hours just with racing thoughts and being confronted with this exact thing of like this fear that if I'm honest and if I'm truthful about what's happening to me, and if I try and share that part of me with this new community that I found, they won't accept me, or they'll think that I'm lying, or they'll reject it, or like a million other reasons or things to be fearful of, right? And so that was like a common theme throughout my head throughout the night, was just like concerns, because I mean I come from a medical background. I'm not a doctor by any means, so I don't diagnose, right? But I was a nurse in the ER and in inpatient psychiatric units for like over 10 years. I know what it looks like to be clinically psychotic and have, schizophrenia and different taboo, hot topic diagnoses. I know what that looks like pretty intimately, especially working in the ER. And it's hard not to notice the parallels of some of these things that happen in shamanism and are happening in my own life. And so that's just like a huge worry of mine that will be received that way, because I understand that is quite literally how it's interpreted. Like, that's the mainstream interpretation of it. So long story short, it was actually received really well, but I didn't want to talk about it at all, except like that was just like the first like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the panel. It seems like the universe was forcing me to bring this up, and I was like, all right, shit, like I guess I have to address this, and it seemed like it was received well. It seemed like no one was off put by it or anything like that, which was good. You know, I don't want to be insulting, especially, you know, I feel like cultural appropriation is kind of like a big thing with this, and I unfortunately happen to be a white guy. So I don't know how to navigate these waters, because I don't want to like step on toes or anything like this is happening to me. I don't know what's happening.
Dude, your self-awareness right now. Your self-awareness right now is crazy.
I'm just trying to not offend people while also being honest about what's happening to me, and then like whoever I don't scare away, then like, hey, let's have a conversation about this so I can kind of bounce stuff off of you. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, man.
I don't even remember what the fuck the real general question was.
Oh no, I was just asking you to give us a brief rundown. That was great, man. I think one thing that you have to kind of accept about this, and you know that I eventually too will have to accept about this, is to walk this path and to speak your truth. You are going to piss a lot of people off, brother. And there's going to be all the people telling you you're fucking crazy, you're a white dude, you can't do this. But like, you know, let's get into the nitty gritty of it, man. Like, you know, you've had these experiences that you feel like have called you to shamanism, and like dude, I was so excited to talk to you about this, because I feel like I have not been able to connect to another human being on this exact same feeling in this way, because of the same sort of circumstances that you're describing, of like, I'm this white dude, there's all this like weird tension and pressure around like the word shaman, dude. It's like this like, and it's starting to get to the point, dude, where it's pissing me off in this way. Because like, it's like you can't even talk about it. It's like you have to constantly walk on eggshells, and you can't explore this topic. Like, I don't know if you noticed this the other day in our panel, man, but I kind of like, there was a moment there where I got kind of angry, because, you know, I was trying to speak my truth on this subject, and the way I was described, we were talking about shamanism and different things, and I was just, you know, having this thought experiment about shamanism in general, and kind of like bringing up to the panel, like, what is a shaman, right? And, you know, I was describing some experiences that I've had with like my best friend. And I was like, in some of my experiences, like, that dude in my mind has been my shaman. And, you know, what irked me about it is it got played off as like, oh no, like, you don't understand what a shaman is. Like, that's basically a glorified trip sitter you had there. And so, you know, I asked, all right, how would you define a shaman? And I really like what Locus said there. Locus said something about like, well, my understanding of a shaman is somebody who essentially, you know, has like sort of walked this path before, swam in these waters, can kind of gauge where you're at during the experience. They can safely facilitate this experience for you. They come at it with the best of intentions of love and helping you on your path to healing yourself. And then on top of that, it's in their best interest and your best interest for them to help you integrate your experience. And so they literally described my best friend to a T, but then basically said, but he's not a shaman, because like he you know, and like they couldn't explain why. You know, Rob kind of made me angry, because he's like, well, and Rob did the same thing. He described a shaman in this way and described my best friend, but was like, but your best friend's a glorified trip sitter. And it's like, okay, you know, I don't know if you've really thought about this in depth, and if you're being completely honest with yourself. And I think I think that there is this sort of dogmatic thinking and behavior that is spilling over into the psychedelic space. And this is another big part of the discussion we had the other day of like, and when I say dogmatic thinking, it's that boxed in behavior and thinking, a way of thinking of like, it has to be this way. It's the exact same thing in my mind that happened to organized religion. You know, you had these sort of mystical people with these mystical teachings that they felt like would be beneficial for mankind to pass down and to instill in our culture. And some people took those things and manipulated them and fit it into a box and said, you have to do it this way. And then you look at organized fucking religion today, and it just perpetuates a lot of people's suffering. I think it's archaic and irrational, and yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I have a few things that I would like to say to that. I mean, first and foremost, we all create our own reality, right? So no one is right or wrong in this topic, because it's literally how you choose to see it. That's how your world gets to be, and that's like the beauty of being this divine spiritual creature that is a human, right? So I would say, like, I understand your anger. I don't get angry at it. I get just more like almost sad, just that I wish that our realities more closely overlapped with people, or that there was like more of a openness to, like, an accepting nature to it. And people use the example of indigenous cultures a lot, which I find interesting because it completely discredits what the indigenous, first of all, the notion of indigenous is kind of dumb to me. We're all indigenous to this planet. But yeah, just you're kind of discrediting what they're saying, which is this narrative that they learned from the plants themselves, which is exactly what we're replicating right now. Like, we're just totally ignorant, brand new baby psychedelic culture, more or less. We're the ignorant white guys stumbling through these psychedelic realms, and we're learning from the plants how to handle it, whether it's our own bad trips or whether it's literally directly channeled messages from these plants. Granted, a lot of this is borrowed from these other cultures who have walked this path before us, but why wouldn't we do that? That makes the most sense. That would be ignorant not to do that, not to learn from more experienced people. But I think it's interesting that people are quick to dismiss this idea that there's levels to shamanism, and that like you can be sort of this shaman figure in other people's lives. Like, I plan on helping my dad through his first mushroom trip at some point, and in that respect I would consider myself a shaman, just because I am my experience in these realms far outweighs his, at least his memory of it, and so I'm going to help him guide him through that. I think that is really all it is just someone who has bridged the gap between this physical world and the spiritual world. To jump into the nitty gritty, I was thinking about this today in the shower and started having like a channeled message with my higher self, and basically the simple understanding of it was that literally anyone can be a shaman. All human beings they're hardwired for it. We have the circuitry, we have the spiritual connection to the divine. We all are able to be a shaman. But here's the caveat to that is, the only people that will actually become shamans and have that ability to navigate those waters are the ones that have that desire and put in the work to learn how to do it and have that calling. And then, so it's a bit self-limiting in that no one can be a shaman that isn't a shaman just because they would never go down that path in the first place. I think that is maybe that's too simply put, but in my opinion, that is the kind of minimum bar for shamanism is, do you have that desire in your heart? And if you do, then you already have all the equipment in your physical body and your energy body to learn those skills, and the plants will teach you. They have more wisdom than any indigenous culture ever. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it now, at least having gone through what I've gone through. That's definitely changed, because I was really that was a touchy word, I guess, for me too before coming into any of this, just because I didn't know anything about shamanism or what it means, where it came from, and all that stuff. But when I started researching it kind of out of necessity from my own experiences, it came from everywhere. It came from, Scandinavia and like all these different places all over. So to claim that it's, insulting to South Americans or something, it's just, that's an ignorant view. And that is kind of the heart of a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of people being offended by things in general. It's a lot of times out of ignorance, I think, which, not trying to be offensive to anyone, but that's usually what it is. It's like, if you're mad or angry about something, it may be because you don't understand it. Obviously, there's levels to that too, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, dude. And let's just, in order to speak our truth, like I said earlier, let's accept the fact that we're going to piss some people off today. And that's okay, because like I just said, we are speaking our truth. And, a lot of this to me, man, comes back to that fundamental question of all right, how do you define a shaman? And why do you get to define what my shaman is? You know what I mean? And to me, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. I think everyone has that capacity. Like, have you ever been in the presence of somebody who, like, needed empathy and so you gave them a hug? Like, you're a fucking shaman, dude, in my eyes, truly. And now, but like what we're talking about here in the psychedelic space, in the psychedelic renaissance, like, let's cut out the fat. When we're talking about shamanism, when it comes to that, we're talking about people who can facilitate those experiences in a safe way, people who have the right intentions doing that, and then people who can, like, kind of help you integrate those things and pull from those experiences what you wanted or needed, you know, like self-growth and release of traumas and whatever it is, man. And so, like, you know, we are, if you think about it, Jake, we are modern men, right? Facing modern day problems, living in modern day society. And I have all the love and respect in this world for this sort of like ancient traditions and the ayahuasqueros and the shamans from South America. Like, absolutely. Like, I will always honor that and respect that and even probably implement a lot of that into my own practices. But, you know, if you think about it, this is this set of people in this completely different part of the world facing completely different problems than we do. And also, not all of them, but a majority of these shamans that people are referencing, brother, it's like they are ayahuasca shamans. Like, and if you think about the psychedelic renaissance that's going on today, dude, like, there is not, like, people are not just trying to do ayahuasca. Like, people are out here trying to do mushrooms. They're trying to smoke some DMT. They're trying to do 2CB. Some people are trying to do MDMA therapy. Like, there is, you know, there is going to be this absolute need for, like, how do we pull from that, the South American shamans and what they've learned and what's been successful from them, and find a way to merge that with our modern culture, man. And, like, in the process of even just talking about this, it's like we piss off people even within our own circle.
Right. And I think, I mean, I respect and understand and agree with excuse me, a lot of the concerns, because there's huge dangers to what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
The first thing I would say is my biggest concern is the alternative, in that these things are placed only in the hands of authorities in the medical or political spectrum, and then we've lost the game again. I mean, not that we've already lost because it's just illegal flat out, but to play into this delusion that only medical professionals or the government is able to safely dole these things out, not only are you disrespecting indigenous cultures again, but you're not going to have proper access to these things. Like, that's tried and true. I'm not even going to debate that. So there is, like, the only alternative is your friend being your shaman right now, because not everyone has the ability to pay to go to an ayahuasca ceremony down in the appropriate geographical location. So we have no choice. Like, everyone has a human right to access this. If you're curious about it, you need to recognize the dangers. You need to do your proper research, do your due diligence. You're an autonomous human being, right? That's the whole point that we're fighting for. So we have to live that to the fullest, right? If you, like, I don't post the warnings before my videos, right, anymore either. I did a couple times in the beginning, but I don't feel like I have a need to do that anymore, because you're an adult. If you do these things, that's of your, I didn't put the mushroom in your mouth. That's not on me, right? I'm very open about the negatives, the positives. I tell people not to do it. But I'm not going to hold your hand with this. And so I feel that way with everything. Like, if you're going to trust your friend who's only done 3, mushroom trips as your shaman, that's on you, bro. Like, that's not my fault that you fucked up and chose the wrong guy to conceptualize as your spiritual leader, right? So I think you can't go in any extreme. Like, you can't gatekeep this term, because then where else are we going to go? I can only go to Mind Bloom and get my little dose of ketamine? Like, no, I don't agree with that. But I also, I don't agree with just telling, like, anyone has any psychedelic experience or even just a hint of human compassion can be a shaman, right? Like, I respect your nuance to it, because, like, it's the same with, like, the word love. Like, I use the word love to everyone, but I realize that other people are very conservative with it, and they are scared to say I love you to someone even they're in a relationship with them. I feel like that might be why we both err on the side of generosity with the word shamanism. because we see it as more of a spectrum, and it's very fluid, and there's levels to this. And I love what you said, where it's like, let's trim the fat and talk about it in this specific context, because that's how I see things too. And I can use the word shaman. My fucking dog was my shaman a couple of times. Like, I don't feel offended by that. I don't see why anyone else would. And I'm certain that these people who are the real shamans in tribes in jungle somewhere would have a spiritual enough connection with some animal in the jungle and have considered it a shaman at one point in their own spiritual journey. So I think I stated everything I wanted to say. Like, obviously you got to be careful. Don't be an idiot. But yeah, some people, white guys can be shamans. People can be shamans. It's I don't know what's happening to me, but I can tell you from my own personal experience, like, it's not a choice sometimes. Like, this shit just taps you on the shoulder and keeps tapping you until you're forced to confront it. And that's where I'm at. And so that's why I'm kind of maybe advocating for more openness in more accepting culture.
Yeah, dude. And the way that I've heard shamanism described, and I forget which book I read this in, but this knowledge was pulled from, these South American tribes and these ayahuasqueros. And what one of these ayahuasqueros was describing is that down there's like these two types of shamanism. And the first one is the sort of like, I don't know if this is the best terminology, but like the high priestess model, in terms of there's the dude who they like entrust to go to the spirit realm. Like, he has the access to go do that and the permissions. He does that. He brings back the knowledge and then disseminates it to everybody else for everyone's benefit, right? And then there's the other side of shamanism, where it's like, I am helping facilitate and lead you through your own direct experience. You know what I mean? I think in the modern day world, in this Western world, like, we're going to experience a lot of both. And I think that that's needed. I think both are needed there, both forms of shamanism. But yeah, man, it's just like, I'm with you in terms of like what I was saying earlier. I don't think that the word shaman's very fluid. And, I refer to like my friend as a shaman, or somebody who gave somebody a hug as a shaman. And I want to be very clear, like, to the audience and everything, that I'm not saying that because you can give someone a hug and show empathy, that I think you should be entrusted with leading people through super powerful psychedelic experiences. Cause like you said, dude, like, you're playing with fire there. Like, this shit, like, while we glorify it a lot, and like me and you both have had these super enriching experiences, like, there is some people, dude, who wish they had never touched psychedelics and probably would have been better off if they didn't. Meaning, like, it can really put people into a bad place sometimes, and even ruin some people's lives. And so, like, you have to approach this very honestly and very carefully. And like, I don't have the answers. Like, you know what I mean? I don't have the answers in terms of like, what exactly should our model look like? Like, and how do we decide that? And like, do we put regulations on that? Is there a certain fucking certificate that you're going to have to get? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how we come to that conclusion. I think it's going to be a long, drawn out process of trial and error, and there's going to be some collateral damage along the way, unfortunately. But, I think that it is going to be a matter of people like me and you and all the people in our panel the other day, and just the psychedelic community in general coming together and putting our minds to this and doing the best we can, I guess.
No, I think, not to go back to, Rob, but what he said about the biker club kind of model, I think that's brilliant. That is exactly what we need, because there's so much nuance to this. There's so much sorry, but like everyone is so different across the board, across, like, from town to town. People are different with how they're going to want to experience these things, and the kind of safety guidelines that they're going to want, the kind of freedoms that they're going to want. So I think that's the best way to do it. I think that we've kind of sort of fallen into that just with like the way that music festivals are, and there's the kind of psychedelic conventions and panels that are cropping up now, and what we're trying to kickstart in our own little community. I think we're starting to see more of that, but yeah, I think. Hey, go ahead. You have something?
Oh yeah, dude. And like, whenever you brought this up the other day, like, I said, dude, in the panel, I was like, what is, and I wasn't like expecting an answer from you in the moment, but I asked you, I was like, what are the next steps in this? Like, if this is truly like something you feel called to, and like, I hope like I've also felt this call, man. Like for people who don't know, I literally went to prison, and part of that was for hosting illegal underground DMT ceremonies and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So like, in my mind was like, all right, what are the steps then? If you really want to like do this, if you feel called to this, like that. And part of the reason why I felt called to this, man, is because anybody who knows me or looks at my social medias or my YouTube, it's very apparent that this is like my passion in life. For whatever reason, psychedelic drugs. And it's not the slant of like degeneracy and like, let's just be spun out. Like it's a holistic like thing that has grown with me in this, unique way. And I obsess about it, right? Like this is my passion in life. And I felt that calling too. And I started to, in a way, walk that. And I feel like I still am walking that path, because I'm still going to those places and trying to disseminate that knowledge to other people's benefit in the best way that I can. But, so like, if you think about the classic sort of call to shamanism, like you were referencing earlier, it's like in the ancient traditions, they talk about people having these callings and these visionary experiences through the plants and different things that led them to that path. Like, hey, I was basically told by the plants, like, you should do this, And so that's what you've experienced. I've also experienced a similar thing. I think another big part of that path is putting yourself through the fire, swimming in those waters, drowning a bit, you know what I mean? So that you have that experience and like where people are going to when they are with you. Cause like, man, like I don't think I could ever sit with somebody and entrust them with my psyche and spirit in that way if they have not swam in those waters themselves. And I don't think anybody else should either, and that's a dangerous thing there about the sort of medical models. You have like 60-year-old white dudes who don't even understand psychedelics, who've never taken psychedelics, being your shaman or therapist in that moment. Like that's another question I've had is like, okay, if that is a model that we're going to provide for people, I think that those therapists and these people, doing that, these doctors should have to go through some psychedelic experiences. I truly believe that, and I know not everyone's going to agree with that. And there's a lot of nuances there, but yeah. So like, all right, so you felt the calling, Jake, you've put yourself through the fire, and I know it's not the sort of like ritualized, boxed in way of thinking that everyone thinks about shamanism, dude. But in my mind, you like are a shaman. You go to these places, you put yourself through that, and then you've been coming back and like spreading those little nodes and giving that to other people. Like, hey, here's kind of what like I learned in this experience. Like, and that goes back to one of the models of shamanism that I was talking about earlier, that these ayahuasqueros even describe themselves. So you've got the calling. You've put yourself through the fire. You're kind of taking like the baby steps and walking that path is, and like, I don't want there to be, don't incriminate yourself or anything like that, dude. But, like, is one of your next steps, like you would eventually like to facilitate these experiences for more people? I know you brought up doing this for your father, which I think that's like a beautiful way to sort of, get started with that. But
I've always been that kind of influence in my own little circle of life, right? Because I am by far the most interested in psychedelics out of everyone that I know in person, right? For the most part that I could think of. Maybe I'm forgetting someone, and if so, I'm sorry, you're fucking crazy. But for what I remember, I'm the craziest person. And so it's always kind of that dynamic where I am helping other people. And up until recently, I wouldn't say that I was I would have loved to, consider myself that, but I didn't consider myself a shaman. I was just a trip sitter. I was someone who's experienced. I've definitely drowned in the waters, and I know how to kind of resuscitate myself afterwards. And so that was the extent of the services that I would say I offered, and even that was very, very, few and far between. I didn't really do that much, and I don't take psychedelics that much anymore. I really don't. Like once or twice a year, maybe, if that. And that is because I don't need to anymore. And the nature of my trips have changed drastically now. And basically, if you want to talk about steps, I don't know if this is necessarily the replicatable part of shamanism, but this is at least what's happening to me and how I have gone about it, or how it happened to me. Is basically I kind of stripped. I mean, just a little quick history about me. I grew up in a very conservative fundamentalist Christian cult, and so for the first 20 years of my life, I knew nothing, and I eventually, just from my own cognitive dissonance, left that cult. And then it took me years and years to finally actually wake up to the realization that it was truly a cult, and not just that I didn't want to follow my parents' religion anymore, but there was something more insidious to it than that. So anyways, it took me multiple steps of waking up. There's multiple layers to this where you're stripping away large parts of yourself. It mirrors a psychedelic trip where like the last 8 years of my life have been an ego death in many respects. And so that is really, I would say, the kind of the first point of realization that you're on a more shamanistic path, where you see that life is a psychedelic trip, and not just like as a funny, ironic term, but like legitimately there are strong parallels to the ebbs and flows of psilocybin coursing through your veins. You see that in looking backwards in the history of your own life. You understand how timelines are, circular, and things were there for a reason, and there's a very, very, very specific path that you are on that started before you were born, and then you can kind of see the full circle of how it ends, and like the completeness to that. And you can see that picture outside of a psychedelic trip. You could just start to see it naturally in your day-to-day life without taking any sort of substances, and you get to a point where there really isn't any other options. So I'm not even saying, like, my role right now, or as I see it right now, is I am just trying to fully learn and map out what these experiences are and what I can do with them. And that's why the last year or two I kind of strayed away from taking psychedelics and working with the plant medicines, but I started trying to answer the questions of these other altered states of consciousness. They seem psychedelic. If that is repeatable, then I need to learn that. I need to master that so I can connect all the dots. And so that's when I started doing deep meditation. I started, learning about these different hypnosis tapes and things like that, and started accessing psychedelic or astral realms outside of psychedelics. And now that I feel like I'm kind of getting a good grasp on that, and I'm really retaining information and knowledge and having open contact with entities now, even outside of meditation, I think I'm on a better path to start sharing those experiences with people. So I'm just focused on making my content again. I kind of took a break for a couple of like 6 months or so, and I'm just trying to start slowly rolling out the experiences that I have had over the last couple of years that have gotten me to this point. And then once I feel comfortable in that realm, then I'll start branching out into taking a more like active role in trying to help people and really build stuff. Because like another thing that like we touched on briefly one of the last times we talked about it, and we talked about it in the panel, is like I see visions of the future, right? That's one of the things, this aspect of this relationship that I've developed with these things, is they show me things either in the astral realm or just visions, like if I close my eyes, and it's like literally as if I am flesh and blood in the future experiencing this shit, and I see where the psychedelic community is going. I see the types of things that we are going to be able to establish, the places that we'll be able to build for people to go, the types of products that we'll be able to create for people to help facilitate these things. Like I've been shown them by these entities, so I don't know what to do with that just yet. I know that it's a kind of a certainty that I'll get there. It's inevitable. I don't really know how to bridge the gap, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, man. No, dude, there's a lot there, and
yeah,
what you were saying, what you were saying about like I don't need to take psychedelics as often, and I'm starting to connect the dots on my own and see the full circle here. That's something I've thought about with my own life, my own story, dude. And especially like there's something about the past like 2 months, these past 2 months for me, dude. It's all the dots are starting to connect in this very sort of like, I don't want to say creepy, but bizarre. It's just too weird for it to be a coincidence, most of these things. And I look back on different struggles in my life and obstacles and different formidable experiences. And it's just like, oh yeah, like divine intervention. Like, yeah, like, everything. But one thing my mom's always told me this since I was like a little boy. And I used to think it was kind of like bullshit, but as I've gotten older, it just keeps getting more and more true. And she told me that everything happens for a reason. And, people, not everyone's going to like believe in that. And I don't even know if I fully believe in that, but it's funny because as I get older, that at least in my life just seems to get more and more true. And I reflect back on, the things that pushed me down this path too, of like, first of all, the weird way that DMT sort of just appeared in my life. Like I didn't have to go searching for it. It appeared to me. And then, I was selling psychedelic drugs, man, but like I had people coming to me to do DMT, and it was like, I just reached this point of like, all right, like I'm not going to keep like turning people away. You know what I'm saying? Like obviously like this is something they want, and like I know how to like vaporize this shit correctly, and like I know some good music to play over here, and like I know that I have their best intentions at heart, and so it was a weird time in my life, man, because like I knew that I was playing with fire in this weird way, but I also knew like, okay, when someone comes into my home, they're in this safe environment, they're shown love, they're seen for who they are, right? That was a big part of it, is like, hey man, like, what the fuck are you dealing with? Like, what's going on in your heart, dude? And like, and it was this like holistic full spectrum thing. And, these people were like dear friends and still are dear friends to me, man. And like, even to this day, this has been several years, I'm still helping some of these people integrate this shit. You know what I mean? And like, we still talk about it. And one of the things that I started doing, Jake, I don't know if I've ever like told you about this, is, I'd have people come over for this DMT ceremony, and I would try and like optimize the set and setting in the best way possible in terms of, like I had fucking incense burning and the parangi is playing through the speakers at a low volume, and like it's very, I make sure I made them very comfortable. But one of the things that I started offering to people, Jake, is I would say, if it would make you feel more comfortable, I will smoke this DMT before you, in front of you right here, if that would just make you feel more comfortable to make the leap. And almost everybody like said, yes, like please do that. And so I had a lot of experiences, dude, in a very short period of time that was basically just like, all right, here we go again. Somebody wants to smoke DMT tonight. Like, so I guess I'm going to the cosmic circus. And it was, yeah, dude, like that thing I was doing in terms of smoking the DMT before them, it was very interesting because I had multiple experiences. I don't know if you've ever done this on DMT, but you'll like start saying something. And it's like you're saying something in that realm, but you're also, your physical body back here keeps saying it. And so other people, when you come back, they're like, you kept saying love or something. But there was multiple experiences, man, where like I would say things like, I've brought a friend. I've brought a friend. I've brought a friend, man. And I would go to that place with that intention, and that my all of my life force and thought directed towards that. Like, hey guys, I'm bringing a friend. Is this okay? Like, please show them a good time, what they need to see. That, man, and the direct communication feedback that I got from that, from the other realm, whatever it is, was super interesting. And
because they want you to do it.
Man.
They want you to keep going. They want you to share it.
And that's the vibe that I got from it, dude. Like, there is nothing else in this world that I've done that gives me a more direct sort of like contact with my spirit or my higher self or God than dimethyltryptamine. And that is the message I have consistently received over these several years that has stayed consistent, is like, hey man, like, and it sounds weird, but like, bring people here. It's okay. We want you to do that. And I've even like gotten direct visionary experiences about the Launchpad. And like what you were saying about like I've seen these like possible realities I could step into. Like I've been shown like, hey dude, like this, like do this, like we like this. And so it just like, but then you come back into your own physical body and you're grounded by reality and other people's psyches and stuff. And you start to even doubt those experiences and have that self-doubt. And then you have these experiences again, which gives you the gift of remembrance of like, oh yeah, no, like yeah. And so it's just like this game we're playing of like not trying to step on people's toes and respect, you know, the ancient traditions and really not trying to hurt anybody. Like I think, and that's a big part of this too, man, is that I think there's so much smoke and mirrors when it comes to the psychedelic experience. Like, let's be honest, like there's so much smoke and mirrors going on. And with that, I think a lot of people lose themselves to delusion. And I think that a lot of people can get this false idea and narrative that like I have these super special powers and like I can manipulate that and like, you know, and not that I think some people don't. I definitely do think there's some badass dudes out there who have swam in these waters enough that they have some standing there. But, you know, I think that there's going to be a lot of fake gurus out here who are just trying to like bolster their own ego up and you know, like maybe make money off people and manipulate people or hold a position of power or whatever it is. And with those bad intentions there, like, you know, I think that can only exacerbate those dangers that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, when I want to talk about this, I have to pee so bad.
Yeah,
so
go pee, dude.
I'll tell you in a minute what my response is.
Okay, bro.
All right, let's talk about shamanism. All right, so let's see. I'm trying to remember where we left off. That's a bit to unpack. But oh yeah, so you're talking about your kind of like call to share this experience, and it seems like it's reflected by these entities, right? Like I totally agree. That is exactly the experience that's happening to me. Now, if I would make it a recommendation or at least share like a path to go down, and it's things that you've played with before, but basically what I did was I shed every belief system that I had, every ideology that I thought was real. I just kind of deleted it from my reality. I examined them all, and none of them held weight. And so I just kind of let go, not in an angry way, in a conspiratorial way, nothing, like no animosity. I love Christianity. I love a lot of, you know, themes, concepts, phrases from the Bible that I cling to understand my own, you know, humanity and experiences. No ill will. I just don't think that that's the ultimate truth. And so I just was slowly letting go all of these belief systems. And then once I did that, all I did was focused on every single possible modality that I could use to elicit psychedelic experiences outside of psychedelic usage. And so I started fasting. I started meditating every single day. I was trying lucid dreaming. I was journaling every day, doing affirmations, showing gratitude for the spiritual connection that I was hoping to establish. And then it happened. It just all these things started turning on, waking up. I started remembering about these psychic abilities that I used to have as a child that used to scare me, and somehow I turned them off, and now they're turning back on again, and I'm learning what they are and how to use them and control them in a less intense environment, in a way that I can actually understand it now as an adult, and not with the scary lens of Christianity. You just kind of wake yourself up again through this deep meditation. You establish access to the psychedelic realm, the astral realm, however you conceptualize it. You just be thankful for opening up that channel of communication, and then eventually it will be open, and you will. Yeah, it's different for everyone, right? Everyone has different psychic abilities that manifest greater. It's kind of on a spectrum, like everything is. So maybe for you it's clairvoyance or clairaudience. There's a lot of different ways that spirits, angels, aliens, psychedelic entities will try and contact you. And so you just kind of got to learn yourself. You got to reconnect with who you were as a kid and open those channels of communication again and learn what they mean. And then you will be like very, very specifically guided. But there's not going to be a question of, oh, what should I do today? Like, they'll tell you. So that's what I did. And I think it would work for other people.
Yeah, no, dude. And I love that because, like, I feel like I've reached this somewhat similar point in my life of, like, you know, one thing that I do a lot, dude, is I like walking meditation. Like, walking meditation to me puts me in this very unique mind space, you know, sober walking meditation, man. And in that, there feels like there is this sort of like connection thing going on a lot of the times. And it's not always within walking meditation. You know, I could be in the shower, dude. I could be at the park with my son and I get hit with these, I don't know if you want to call it messages or what, but it feels like this gift of remembrance and this sort of weird clarity that is psychedelic. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I've spent a lot of time away from that whole like lifestyle that I was living of, you know, consuming an insane amount of psychedelic drugs, selling psychedelic drugs, and also facilitating psychedelic experiences. Like, it was a pretty bizarre, you know, crazy time in my life that I'm extremely grateful for. But, you know, I've spent a good amount of time away from that, and I just keep getting these sort of like universal nudges. You know what I mean? And one thing that, you know, and this is something like we'll probably have to talk more in depth about off camera, just because like it's, yeah, but, you know, like I've had some like opportunities present themselves to me that just don't seem like a coincidence, and they were followed up by how it came to be was I smoked DMT on this hillside over here in Kentucky, right, you know, on land between the lakes, looking over a giant lake. It's one of my favorite spots, and I've smoked DMT there before. And this was my last major breakthrough. You know, I smoked DMT there, and I got this message, dude, of like, I was shown two realities, right? And one reality was the reality where I continued to smoke weed every day and feed into that weed addiction that I had. And what it showed me in that reality for myself, and I don't want to project this onto anybody else listening, like this is my own personal sort of struggles and relationship to weed, but what it showed me with the reality of me continuing to live that life was this life of like sort of stagnation and frustration. And then it showed me this other reality, and this other reality it showed me is everything that I have been working towards and praying about and communing with the mushroom and other psychedelic drugs about for years now, right? And it showed me everything that I want. And the message that I got, and like this whole story is going to sound fucking crazy, man. Like the message that I got, dude, was like, it felt like I made this deal with God up there on that hillside of like, hey man, the last domino that needs to fall is like, you need to cut the weed shit out of your life now. And like, the message I got, dude, was like, hey, when you do this, like, we'll take care of things on our end. And so I quit weed, right? Within a few days, man, like spooky shit started happening to me. Like, I mean, and I don't mean like shit was talking to me through the walls or anything like that. I mean, like, things that are out of my control, that I had absolutely no manipulation over, anything like that. Other people reaching out to me and opportunities presenting themselves. And you know, maybe it is this massive coincidence, but it just seems like such, dude, it just seems like such funny timing that like I'm currently going, and I'm still in this, man. Like, I hope you know that. Like, I'm still in this, and I'm currently going through this. And then you were expressing the other day on the panel of like, hey, I felt this call to shamanism. And I was like, dude, we have to talk about this. Please.
And I'm getting the same exact message from the universe about quitting weed. And I'm struggling with it. I'm thinking about turning it into a video and kind of vlogging it and maybe clinging to that as some sort of way to get from under this burden. But I have the same exact visions, the same exact message almost every single day. And I'm struggling with like the shame of this addiction as well. That's just like weighing down my energy. Yeah. And I know,
Yeah, dude,
I know for a fact, like, it's not like a question or curiosity or a coincidence. Like, I'm at the point where I know I'm very in tune with whatever the fuck is happening outside of this 3D reality. And they're telling me that if I quit weed, I will be successful and I will be able to accomplish these things that I want to do. And I'm all for it. Like, I want out from under it. I want to learn how to master that area of my life. I'm just struggling with it. It's hard. And especially because I'm quickly realizing that that is the main tool that I've been using to kind of like dull my senses with, specifically with this spiritual journey. Like, I mean, like, we talk about this connection to the other, these connections to spirits and this psychedelic called a shamanism, and it is a beautiful thing and I love it, but it is also a very scary thing and it keeps me up at night, and it's really hard moderating my sleep and my emotions towards it without weed. That's like the biggest thing that I'm trying to figure out. So I don't really know. I know you're on the right page. Exactly what you're talking about. It's not coincidence. It's real. Like, they're telling you exactly what's going to happen, about to happen. Follow that. And the universe is right now speaking to me through you, telling me, like, kicking my ass and telling me that I need to stop fucking waiting. But it's just it's scary. So if anyone else is like watching this and resonates with it, like, it's not, everyone struggles with this. It's hard.
Yeah, dude. And like, buddy, like, what I'm going to need from you right now is you're going to need to start being a little bit nicer to my friend Jake here, because I love that fucker and he is beautiful and he's going to do amazing things in this world. And I want you to know that, like, everything that you're describing about your weed addiction, dude, like, my heart right now is filled with so much empathy and understanding for you, because I was literally like in your exact shoes like a few weeks ago or something like that, man. And like, in my mind, I knew it was going to be extremely difficult. And like, let's unpack this a little bit, man, because I don't think this is talked about enough, like weed addiction, because weed gets sort of glorified in this way and downplayed in this way. And don't get me wrong, I think it is a beautiful plant with, you know, beautiful potential, and definitely has great medical benefits for certain people with certain ailments. But I do think with this sort of glorification of it, a lot of people, and myself included, fell into this trap of like, well, it's my medicine. And it's funny how, I don't know if you've experienced this with weed, but like, it's funny how anytime that I quit weed and have been away from it for a while, if I start my relationship to weed back up again, this has happened every single time up until this point, what happens is like, all right, I'm going to just do it every now and then, right? And so I do it and I'm having these like beautiful experiences that are extremely enjoyable. And it's like, all right, like, well, I can do this like once every afternoon. You know, I'll set that boundary. Like, I'll do it once every afternoon. And so then that becomes my schedule, and I'm doing it every afternoon, and I'm ingrained into that neural pathway of I get home, or I finish my work for the day. And so now I'm stoned, and, you know, and then what happens there is then all of a sudden, like, I'm doing it at random other parts during the day. And without fail, brother, in my experience, what this leads to, like, every time, is fucking stagnation and depression. And it sucks, because it starts off as this beautiful relationship that truly feels like it's enriching your life. And to all of us, you know, and then before you know it, you're in this place where it's like, okay, I used to smoke weed to be high for about like 3 hours or something. Now I smoke weed to like get this 20-minute buzz that just fights off the withdrawal symptoms for me.
Right. Just to be normal. Yeah. Just to feel normal. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And like where you're at, man, it's like, you know, and like I knew this before I quit, of like, okay, I have a life to live. Like, I have responsibilities. Like, you have a little boy who depends on you and is fucking adorable, and I'm sure loves and admires his daddy, you know what I mean? And so I'm sure, like, you're probably similar to me, man. You take a lot of pride in that relationship and setting a good example for him and having that connection. And you know that quitting weed is going to put you in this mind state for, I don't know, 5 days, 14 days, 21 days of being cranky and sleep deprived and all these other symptoms that come with it. And it's like, you know, where do I get the fucking space to do that, man? And like, after my experience up on the mountain and a couple other things, it was just like, all right, I had to grapple with like, if I don't listen to the universe's whispers, like the universe is going to fucking yell at me. And that's kind of what I feel like the DMT trip up there was about. Like it was like very direct. Like, hey dude, like this is what what we've been trying to tell you. Quit fucking running from this. And so I just had to rip off the Band-Aid, dude. And like, you know, it was fucking hard. And like, I'm not going to lie to you, Jake. Like it's still kind of hard, man. It's been like, you know, a couple weeks or so, 2 or 3 weeks. And man, like last night I got about 3 hours of sleep. And I know that it's because my body is still adjusting, dude. And like I account for everything. I account for, you know, I optimize my schedule and biohack myself and supplement in every which way possible I can to try and help myself, which by the way, that's something I really want to like go into detail with you about is like, all right, let's optimize, you know, when and if you decide to do this, let's optimize this for you, dude. Like, so it's, you know, not as difficult as it needs to be, because there is ways to mitigate that, a lot of the withdrawal symptoms. But you know, it's, and I think this is a common thread in addiction itself. It's these sort of like, I don't want to call them lies, but these narratives you tell yourself of like, well, I'm just not going to quit right now because of like this and this is going to happen, and you know, so yeah, dude, like I completely understand where you're coming from, and like what you were saying about like I want to make this vlog style video of quitting weed, dude. I cannot believe you said that, because you know how like so I just finished editing my first microdose video, which that video ended up kind of being a lot about forgiveness and stuff like that. That was sort of where my mind took me on that trip in particular. But my next microdose video, and I've had this planned for like since I decided to quit weed. My next microdose video that I want to film soon is going to be about, I'm going to call it like quitting weed or weed addiction. And I'm going to go into depth and super detail about like my own relationship, my story with it, how I feel like other people can approach this, and just bring more awareness to that. So whenever you said I would like to create a vlog style video, dude, where my mind went was like, okay, you know, either we need to do some sort of other collab, like a podcast like this, just on quitting weed, or you need to get out here to Kentucky, dude, and stay in my side room here for like 2 days or however long you want to, and we'll go on a hike or a few hikes, and you know, we can make a microdose video together about, you know, our mutual struggle that we're both facing.
Yeah, man, that would be so much fun to plan. I think that it's definitely necessary to talk about, because that's, especially in like the psychedelic community that we find ourselves in, like I'm sure that is running rampant for everyone, because that's probably the first psychedelic we've all tried, I would imagine, unless you're some sort of psychopath. And yeah, it's just, you never really you don't kick it. It's like, I wish that it was more brutal. I wish that it was harder to do weed. Like I wish it was more like a mushroom trip or an acid trip, and there's like more hesitation to rip that dab pen. But I like, it's just like, I'm gonna rip it every 5 minutes and I'm not even gonna think about it. And you quit even when you do a tea break and you know slowly fall into that, oh, I'm just gonna do that at night. You slip right back into, just like you said, you slip into it every time, because it's just like any other addiction to a substance. Like you build up that tolerance quickly, and it's just habit forming.
No, and what you were saying about like it's so easy to do that, and I wish weed was harder. I wish it was more like mushrooms. This is a great point, because I've thought about this a lot as well. Weed to me seems to have this sort of like spirit to it, in terms of like it's very malleable, right? Like with the whole psychedelic culture, one of the sort of colloquialisms that keeps getting brought up and is consistently brought up is intentions, right? Like setting your intentions. And one thing that I've learned over time, dude, at least for myself, is that it is more important for me to set very hard intentions on my weed use than it is any other psychedelic out there. Because like I've reached this point with psychedelic drugs, and like this might sound bad to some people, but this is my truth. I can just kind of take them with this like trust that whatever needs to play out is going to play out in a way. Like I still do set intentions and gear my mind and do all that, man. But like I can kind of just take them with that blind trust of like, you know, there is an agenda to be played out here. There's a story. The mushroom spirit has a path for me today. But with weed, it's so damn malleable that if like I wanted to, I could use it to watch TV harder than anybody else in this world this afternoon. But also, if I wanted to, I could use weed to like enhance, a trail run, or I could use weed to like enhance, like, going to the park with my son or something like that. It's like I found that I have to set more intentions with weed because it has this sort of malleable spirit. Where on the other hand, like you were saying, mushrooms is like, nope, I'm not in charge of this shit.
Yes, definitely. So, and that's like an interesting point because that's one of the first really, really big trips that I had that I would say was like my initial gateway into being more of like a shaman type figure, at least in my own life. Because it was different than anything I'd had prior to that, where it wasn't just the mushrooms in control, it was I was in control of the mushrooms. Like there was an active narrative where they were revealing to me that I was actually like the puppet master of things, and that took on a different tone than I'd ever experienced before. And one of the interesting pieces to that trip was it showing me how I can use weed as a tool, how that is like the magic wand to being an alchemist in this reality, or at least it can be. And that was what it showed me, how to use it in regards to psychedelic ceremonies and how to use it to precipitate ego death. And it was literally, I was having an active dialogue with the mushroom entity teaching me this, and it was like, all right, whenever you decide that you want to like fully understand what's going on here and you want to have an ego death, take a hit of that marijuana and you set that intention and it will happen. And I sat there for a couple of minutes like debating. I journaled a little bit about it. And it's like, all right, I'm ready to have the ego death now. And I just like turned it on. Like I turned a key and then had an even deeper dialogue with this angel spirit. And then since that point forward, that's as a conflicting message that has been something that I have used in my own life as a way that I've gotten through fasting using marijuana. I use it to be more productive because I set the intention that I want it to be more productive, and then it takes on that role in my life, and I'm just cleaning and doing things around the house. So that's where I'm having an especially difficult time, where I don't feel like my usage actually inhibits me in some ways, where it maybe like it does make people lazy or want to eat, where it's like, yeah, I can use it if I want to be hungry, but I can also use it to like stave off hunger. Like I can actually use it to go fast for 48 hours or whatever. So that's where it's really confusing me, where it's like I'm definitely getting a clear message that I need to quit, but it's also like, why did I just spend all this time learning how to use it? I don't know. I'm so conflicted.
Yeah, no, dude. I literally dealt with the same dilemmas, like in my own way, that are applicable to my own life and circumstances. But yeah, and it's hard, man. And I want to make it like very clear too. Like I'm not saying like I am forever done with weed, dude. Like I'm definitely gonna fucking smoke weed again. You know what I'm saying? Like I love weed, but like I truly like me saying like I'm quitting weed is like this decision that I made of like I'm quitting that toxic relationship to it. And I think part of like reestablishing a good relationship to it is gonna in my own path is gonna be just full on taking a large amount of time away. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't know how long that'll be, if that'll be 2 years of very, very infrequent use, if that'll be 20 years of like infrequent use, or if that'll be fucking 2 months. I don't know. I have a feeling that I have a weird feeling that in this way, the universe will just kind of give me the nudge when it's like, hey man, like maybe you smoke some weed during this ceremony, but like it just comes back to like, I have too good of an understanding of like my own sort of neurobiology and what's going on in my body at this point to continue to like make excuses for myself on that end, because truly like weed, the cycle that I got into with it, and it starts off great, like we were talking about, but the cycle I got into it with it, man, is like, I was living in this fog, like truly in the fog. It didn't feel like the fog, but even just being removed for this short period of time, dude, I've been so much more productive. I have like my conversations with people, like I'm on 3 hours of sleep right now, but I feel like this conversation with you is better than the conversation we had a couple months ago where I had 8 hours of sleep, but I was high.
Right.
And just like I can feel, and what you were talking about too of like earlier, you know, I see all these connections and I'm starting to form these connections. You know, since I've quit, like that is just ramped up to this weird level too, like of this sort of clarity, you know, and I think that people have to be honest with themselves about, you know, understanding the physiological effects that these cannabinoids have on, you know, your endocannabinoid system and your other neurotransmitters as well. And not saying that it's not manageable or even potentially beneficial in instances, but, you know, in my mind, or from my understanding and being removed from it, it's like, oh yeah, I was railing my dopamine in this weird way. And of course there's some serotonergic play and other different things there, but like truly, like it's a very heavily dopaminergic drug, you know? And so the cycle I got into was like, I couldn't do anything, man. Like I could, but it was extremely difficult for me to feel motivated and to accomplish any sort of task without being high and living in that fog. And so like to even go to the fucking grocery store, like I felt like I had to get baked to go to the goddamn grocery store, you know?
Right.
And it also with that, man, I've noticed like came with this sort of weight. I had to carry around this weight of like, all right, like in time out, like when I can smoke before this responsibility, and all it accounted for like, you know, it was a huge part of my schedule, you know, and like the idea of, you know, like, well, what if I have to travel to this country or something? Like, how am I going to get weed there? How am I going to get weed on the flight? Like, you know, it's
right.
It's just, it was crazy. The grip that it had on me, man. But
it's a huge,
yeah, dude, like
energy suck.
Yeah, but I completely understand what you're saying too. Of like, but I've also experienced these like these moments and these like beneficial things from it.
I think what you said was like a perfect point that I needed to hear. Where when you're in the fog, you don't realize you're in the fog, and that perfectly mirrors the lessons that I just learned with fasting. Where like I had a horrible relationship with food. I mean, like yeah, obviously everyone has issues and shit that cause their fucked up, you know, view of reality, but that was one thing that I had to rewire my brain with and just stop eating for days to really understand what my relationship with food should be. And once I took myself out of that fog, because you're in a fog anytime you have food digesting in your system, you're in a fog whether you realize it or not. Once I actually shut that off, I was like, oh my god, dude, like this is how my brain works. Like no one told me that you could just feel like this. You could have energy. And so I think that is exactly that's what you were describing, where it's like I didn't know that until I stopped, until I switched it off and experienced life in a fasted state. And I just need to experience life in a sober state again and remember that, and then I'll have the clarity to be like, oh yeah, dude, like this is so much better. It's just so fucking hard to see it when you're in the fog.
Yeah, dude, I love that connection you just made of like, you know, the lesson you just learned from fasting, because like fasting is something that like part of like my health tool belt has been one of the biggest things, like just everyday intermittent fasting, and then, you know, these periodic sort of extended fasts. And like you said, there is a certain clarity that comes about within a fasted state that hits you with like, oh shit, like, yeah, this is a lot more clear. And obviously it's like, you know, we need food. We're not going to fucking like photosynthesize out here and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's reevaluating that relationship. And, you know, my best friend this past summer, he lost like 50 pounds. And the way that he did it was, you know, and he had been trying all these different modalities, and I had been like trying to help him on his path for a couple years now, but nothing was really giving, you know what I mean? And he couldn't really stay consistent with anything. And then I prompted him in like January, like, hey dude, let's do an extended fast together. You know what I mean? And he ended up going longer than I did. I went like 70 hours, close to 3 days. It was like right at that brink. This dude ended up going for like almost 120 hours. He really got into it because of what you were talking about. He started to experience the clarity that came with it, and it was euphoric to him of like, oh, like, you know, and it goes back to the weed thing. Like, I used to say like, well, I smoke weed because it like it's done this for me and it's helped me do this. And maybe some of those things are true, but I think there's a lot that I've like done in my life and a lot of whatever that I would attribute, like I did this because of weed. But in hindsight, being honest with myself, it's like, no, I did that like in spite of the weed, you know?
That's so interesting. Okay, now I would say that this is one of my biggest concerns is that this path that I'm on in this like heightened spiritual awareness that I have will somehow go away with taking away the weed, because it's like that's a part of my meditation practice, and whenever I quit weed it's really hard to meditate, and I'm sure once I get into like a full clean break it will be easy again, but that's just one thing that like I think that's one of the biggest things that I use to like trick myself into smoking still, is that is somehow associated with my connection to spirituality, and that it will be lessened or go away by my not smoking. So how would you say that you are was there any change in that for you?
Yeah, dude, and I don't want to like project this onto you because, you know, I don't have a crystal ball and I don't, you know, I haven't lived your experience, man. But what actually happened to me was the complete opposite. Like in terms of my connection to God or the spirit realm, you know, that got extremely heightened in this. You remember during our panel discussion, Loka talked about how whenever he quit weed, he went through what seemed like this almost like 3-month, like slightly psychedelic experience. That's kind of what I've been going through, man. And like, it's been, like I've described, the first like few days are kind of hard are very hard because it's like that agitation and like you just agitation and anxiety. And then after those like 3 to 5 days, physiologically you rebound from that and you start to reach a better homeostasis. And then the sleep thing can take a little while, and that's hard, you know, and it's a roller coaster, man. It's an emotional roller coaster. But like through this like difficult, beautiful emotional roller coaster, I've felt more connected than ever before in this really weird way. And I was in the exact same boat of like, I was concerned of, you know, like this is a big part of my protocol and my sort of routine. Like when I cut this out, am I going to be, you know, am I going to be missing out on that? So, and I can't tell you like what's going to happen for you when it comes to that, but truly, man, like just knowing you and all of the conversations that we've had. And also one thing I think that is super crucial here is that you don't just have weed, brother. Like you're a fucking psychonaut spiritual ninja out here, Jake. You got the meditation going. You got the breath work, dog. You have your psychedelic drugs. And so, you know, one of the things that immediately happened to me when I cut out the weed was like, all right, I'm super anxious. I'm super agitated. So I had to buckle down even further on some of these other modalities. Like one thing that has been consistent in my life for a long time is like just a few minutes a day of meditation. You know what I'm saying? Whether that be, you know, I go walking for 2 hours and meditate that way, or I sit down and listen to music and burn incense and you know, really release my body into the couch and stuff like that. But meditation's been a huge part. And whenever I quit, it was like, okay, I am so like tense right now. And I'm not going to go back to that. I'm not going to go back to the weed because I know that's not going to fix my problem right now. It's just going to start the cycle over again. So it's like, what tools do I have at my disposal here? And so, yeah, I've buckled down even harder on taking care of myself in like a holistic way with just, you know, doing more running and meditating more. And honestly too, man, like I've had these nights, like I've had moments within these past few weeks where I've just like had some of the hardest days where I just wake up and I can tell like this is going to be a bad fucking day. And I just got to get through it. And I will sit there, dude, and I will cry. But these days have been very interesting because what sort of happens is there's all this like built up shit that I'm working through an entire day, you know, and dealing with. And I cry and I'm like releasing shit. It's like this psychedelic experience. And at the end of these days, man, I'm hitting these strides of like super clarity, like extreme clarity, and feeling like I'm dumping something, you know. And weed is a funny one because like it's not the same to other traditional drugs when people think about it in terms of like numbing yourself out. You know, I think that weed definitely has that potential to numb yourself out, but it's not the same as like if you're, you know, like on Xanax or some shit like that. That's a little more hardlining that aspect of things. But in my personal experience, like in hindsight, like I definitely think, you know, weed was, you know, I was subconsciously numbing some shit out with weed, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge component of it to me. And that's like within my own process over the last few years of waking up to like the traumas that or whatever that I lived through in a cult and the things that you go through and pulling yourself out and, you know, abandonment issues and things, how that was repeated in my life in different stages, that kind of reinforcing those traumas. Like I've pulled myself out of that and I'm able to understand it and I have peace finally with all of it. And I think it's exactly what you said earlier, where it's like, this is my medicine, but I'm at the point now where it's like, I'm not sick anymore. Like, why am I still taking medicine? I'm not actually sick. And I keep reinforcing this idea that I am sick by taking the medicine now. That's kind of what it feels like. And I'm trying to like just remember that I'm not sick anymore. There isn't anything in my life that I want to numb out. I love my life. I embrace all of this shit.
Yeah.
Like I love where I'm at, and so I don't know why I'm sitting there huffing on something that throws me into fucking anxiety, panic attacks all the time. But then it's like, oh, if I don't do this, then I don't feel so good. It's like, you don't feel good now. Why are you doing it? I don't know.
Yeah, dude. And like, I think that, you know, everything we're talking about, like, there is this sort of spiritual, psychological aspect to it that needs to be addressed and like dove deep into. But also one thing to always remind yourself about, like within this, you know, this process, man, is, you know, there is the physiological side of it too. You know, when you mainline any sort of substance or even like food, you know, and you cut that out or even draw back on it, your body has these rebounding effects. And so like and what you said about, you know, like I'm not sick anymore. That was sort of like a realization for me too, is that for a long time I did smoke weed, especially as like a young sort of adolescent. Like my weed consumption really started because I was miserable, and I had been pretty much miserable my entire childhood. Like, and you know, I'm not going to get into like all my childhood traumas and shit, dude, but like shit was not easy and it was weird, and it put me in this space at 14 years old of being stuck under fucking fluorescent lights in a public school, you know, feeling oppressed and feeling like gloomy about life. And then I found this thing, right? I found weed. And what, honestly, like, you know, what probably drew me into the whole weed thing wasn't just like the aspect of like, this is fun and like, you know, I kind of numb out my problems and like no, dude, like I intuitively knew, even at like 14 years old, like, oh, there's something to this, like deep, you know, and that, because you can reach these very psychedelic states with weed. And that weed will always have a special place in my heart because it gave me that initial appreciation for an altered state of consciousness, you know, and I will always hold Mary Jane with respect and honor for that. But at the same time, like I had to grapple with the fact that like, all right, me and Mary Jane, like our relationship has turned toxic, you know, like I need to cut this bitch out of my life, and I need to cut this bitch out of my life. Like we will still catch up and, you know, have lunch together on the weekends and stuff every now and then, whatever it is. But this, like Mary Jane living with me, oh dude, like it got bad, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it was no doubt an essential step on the path to where I am right now, but it feels like I'm like stretching back to keep a toe on that step where it's like you need to move forward now. You don't need to still be standing there doing that and using that as a foundation for where you are. And that's a hard realization because I was there for it's exactly like you said. That was one of the first things that kind of pulled me out of that depth of despair or whatever you want to call it. That breathed life into me again that I hadn't had since I was a kid, or maybe it was life that I never even got to experience as a kid more appropriately. And so that's why that fell into such a big place in my life. But I think you're right. Like it's not, it doesn't serve that purpose anymore, and I need to rewire my brain into accepting that by just stepping away from it for a while.
Yeah, and also like another really important thing to keep in mind here is that, like, you know, when you first opened up this discussion about weed, one of the things that you said, and I think almost everybody experiences this, is this sort of like shame and guilt cycle that comes with it. You know what I mean? Of like, I you know, like, why can't I quit this? Or like, why? And you going back and forth on it, and there's this certain amount of shame involved. And you know, I think that that's normal that you feel that way, but like, I want to be like that devil's advocate for you here, man, and like remind you that, you know, like, you know, you're a beautiful person who's going to do beautiful things and do like all the fucking potential in the world. And like, seriously, like, you have a special place in my universe. Like, from my frame of reference, like, my life is beneficial because you're in it. You know what I mean? Like, and so like, I just want to remind you of that. Like, when you get to beating yourself up, like, remember that you are loved and admired. You know what I mean, man?
Thank you, man.
So, like,
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, brother. And like, another thing, like, is with this sort of debacle that both me and you are going through, I think that we're at the other side of it. We're both going to be better off by having like been through it and beat it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
It's almost like the universe. I feel like truly the universe is like, hey, like test. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to purposely put this here because we want to like show you how strong you are and shit. You know what I mean? And like, and there's going to be a certain. You've already liberated yourself in so many ways, man, than like the average bear in our society ever will. But this thing is just like the icing on the cake, and is just even going to bring it to like another level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it gives us a deeper level of relatability to people that we can help, certainly. Which I thought a lot about that, and I'm excited to, once I'm in a place in my life where I can kind of utilize that skill set that I have in my back pocket of, you know, not that addiction to weed is on par with some of the other addictions out there, obviously. Like, you know, I both have seen our fair share of that and know the horrors of certain substances. But yeah, like, addiction is addiction in a lot of respects, whether that's gambling or, you know, the various other things that afflict our cultures. So yeah, to be able to go through something like this and have even just a small level of memories that I can use to relate to people that we might be able to help in the future who have gone through harder shit. Yeah, I think that it's a valuable experience. It's just another one of those things that, like, another box that I have to check on this path to hopefully being some sort of actual shaman figure and being able to help other people. It's the same thing with, you know, going through the cult or going through 10 years in, you know, a medical facility and being a nurse and stuff. All those experiences, yeah, they were kind of shitty. Like, that was hard work and a lot of traumatic stuff I saw and happened to me. I wouldn't really want to do it again, but at the same time, it was all essential to get me to where I am now and to have this level of understanding. And so I wouldn't really change anything. So I guess that's what's happening with this. It always fucking sucks. It's just never fun.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. It's like, it's that feeling of like, all right, I know this is just going to be shitty for like 2 weeks or fucking, you know, however long.
Right.
And one of the things that was really crucial to me is I knew, like, all right, I have to let everybody know who's important to me in my life, who I interact with and who I love, that like, hey, I'm about to go through this, or I'm currently going through this. So if I seem like fucking cranky or distant or whatever it is, like, it's because I, like, you know, because I'm going through this. And so that I am going to be different for a little bit, you know, and like and it's about finding the people. If somebody truly loves you, man, like, and you express this to them, you know, they'll hold that space for you of like, hey, dude, like, you know, you don't have to talk to me. You know, like, if you need to take a year away from talking to me, you can. But, you know, at the same time, if you want to talk to me, I'm always here. Like, that type of energy of like, it's okay. Like, I see you, brother, for the good and the bad. And you don't have to always just be the good for me to continue to love you. As a matter of fact, like, a lot of times, like, that sketches me out. If I feel like I don't see the bad in somebody and they're not being their authentic self to me, it's like, what are you hiding?
Right,
I mean? Like,
right.
Like,
Yeah, I can't
yeah,
relate to
like
that
I
at
got
all.
fucking right, dude. Like I got fucking issues, and I'm very open about them. You know,
Right.
like so it's like I don't want to say I expect, but I appreciate that sort of transparency and honesty from other people. You know.
Yeah. No, definitely. And one
Yeah.
other point that to add to it, which maybe will help someone else listening, one of these kind of channeled messages that I got in specifically in dealing with trying to get over this addiction, is that basically just like when I use the example of how in one of my trips I learned that weed could be this tool that I could use to trigger an ego death. The message was that in the grander picture of my psychedelic trip of a life, me pulling the trigger on quitting weed is my next ego death. And that it's that singularity point where you can't see beyond it. You can't conceptualize what's beyond the singularity. But once you fall into that ego death, it's always better. It's always grander than you can imagine. You literally can't see beyond this veil. But so that was the message that was given to me. I haven't gotten the courage yet to like pull the trigger on this ego death. But this is the encouragement I think I needed to just fall into it.
Yeah, dude, I love that conceptualization of it. Of this is my next ego death. Like, yeah, and you kind of have to think about it like that way, dude. Of like, you know, this is about to be a bad trip in a way or something like that. But through that bad trip, I'm gonna be better off. You know what I mean? And I assume, I don't know, but I assume that you've had some difficult experiences on psychedelics, as most people who have taken them quite a bit have. You know, at some point everyone reaches that, you know, and that's like, you know, in a way maybe that's like a training ground for this, you know, and so it's
no, exactly. And like to continue on that point, like virtually every ego death is like uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable, at least at one moment, because you just feel like all the things that you associate as you are just slipping away. They're falling away. You can't grasp at them. You can't even remember your own fucking name. Everything's gone. You're just stripped bare of, and you think that there's nothing left. And then you realize, oh wait, no, like none of that stuff is actually me. Like I'm still me without all that stuff. And then you get to the better side of the ego death and have this beautiful realization of everything coming back to you. That is what it feels like with this, where it's an attachment of the ego with weed, and me quitting it is my ego trying to grip on, be like, no, don't let me go. Like hang on to me. This is a part of me. And it's like smoking weed isn't a part of me. That isn't me. That isn't Jake, right? That is something that I used for a while, but it's not actually who I am. It's not a part of me. It's just a part of the ego that I can throw away at any time, and I'm still here. And that is the realization that you can only get once you've stripped everything away. And that sounds really great, and I just haven't put it into practice yet.
yeah. Oh yeah, dude. And like, I want you to know, like, me quitting weed, like, while I got that very hard message, that sort of yell from the universe, you know, I had been ignoring whispers and lying to myself for fucking years, like quite literally fucking years. So like, I want to like make it very like clear to you, dude. Like, I'm holding that space for you in terms of like, whether you do this tomorrow or you decide to never quit, I don't think any less of you, and like my love for you is like unconditional, not changing because of that thing. But also, if that is a path that you want to go down, man, like know that I am here to serve you and like help you on that path in any way possible. I have all sorts of recommendations for supplementation and different things, you know, but we can get into the nitty gritty of that at some point. But
thank you, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I mean, I'll say this. There's never been an ego death that I've turned down. So this will not be, I don't do that. That's not an option, at all. Yeah. So it's just, yeah, I'm ready. I want to quit yesterday.
Oh, Jake, that's your ego talking. You're so egotistical right now. I mean,
it is. It ironically is. Yeah, it's my ego killing itself.
Yeah, dude. It goes back to what I said earlier. Like, I think a lot of people struggle with this, and it's not talked about enough. Truly, I say that in confidence because I've been in this path. I've walked that path myself. You have as well. We're talking about it right now. I've talked to other friends about this exact same thing. I have, from a third party sort of viewing mode, watched my friends like just live in that sort of stagnation and frustration and making excuses for themselves. And, you know, and with all that said, there is definitely some human beings out there who their life is probably considerably better by consuming marijuana every single day. And I'm grateful that they have that tool, you know, in their tool belt, right? But I just reached the point in my own personal journey where I had to realize and be honest with myself of like, it's not beneficial for me in particular to do it every day.
Right. Yeah, no, So like, this is crazy, right? So one of the things that has happened in like this shamanistic experience is I did like a ceremony specifically on a full moon to kind of like engage with the spirits and jumpstart whatever the fuck is going on here. And fuck, where was I going with this? It was based on what you were just saying. Yeah, okay. So basically, with synchronicities surrounding this narrative of quitting weed and then having weird shit happen afterwards, right? So basically, I did a ceremony where you're supposed to like write down whatever you want, like some sort of manifestation thing, and then, you know, you burn it. And it was like before a psychedelic ceremony that I did when I had this contact. One of the things that I wrote in that kind of manifestation reality that I hope to bring about was that I quit weed, and I couldn't believe all the things that were flowing into my life right after I quit weed, right? And so I wrote that like months ago. And then right after that, like I guess a couple of months ago, I don't know if you heard the song by Oliver Anthony at all. It's Rich Men North of Richmond. It's like this country song that really blew up. It's this random dude in the middle of West Virginia. He quits weed, dedicates his life to God, and 2 weeks later, he has this song blow up. It goes to the top of the 100 Billboard, like whatever the fuck the chart is for like 2 weeks. The first artist to ever do it, to have this number one song trending for weeks. He has tens of millions of views on his song. And then there was another person, another interview I was watching, same exact thing where they're like, yeah, I quit weed, and then 2 weeks later I started getting all these crazy opportunities and like and things just started falling into place, weird synchronicities. And then I talked to you and you're like, yeah dude, I quit weed 2 weeks ago, and like all this weird shit starts happening. I'm like, all right, fuck, like I get it, all right, I get it. Like I'm supposed to do this, and then weird shit will happen to me in 2 weeks. Like I don't actually know if that's real, but it sure seems like how else am I getting this repetitive weird matrixy type message where it feels like everyone in my life, like if you just quit weed for 2 weeks, like the devil will come and give you a career or something. Like, I don't know, but I'm willing to try it.
Right, dude. It's the synchronicities here are crazy. And where I was at with it, I remember like right on the sort of cusp of quitting, and you know, I got that universal yell there. I was mad. Like I was almost mad at, like, I don't know if you would call it God or the universe, but I was like, really? Like fucking really, dude? Like you couldn't just let me have this one thing.
The one
you know what
thing.
I mean? Like,
yeah.
like, all right, like I've done everything else. I've done everything
Right.
else that's been asked, you know, like, but this thing, like
Right.
really, man?
I'm
like,
dedicating my life
thing.
to psychedelic drugs. Why can't I do this?
Right, right. And no, man, I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't know. Once again, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't have the biggest fucking feather out here, but like, I don't think it's a coincidence, man. And it's one of those things, like, if you're feeling drawn towards it, whatever, explore it. But, you know, that doesn't mean that this ego death and moving into this other reality is where you're going to stay at forever, you know? Maybe through that ego death and moving into that new reality, you will be able to establish this new relationship to weed that is like really, really enriching. And, you know, you'll look back on like this time in your life with immense gratitude of like, wow, like I'm happy that first of all, I went through the bad shit with it and understood like how that happens to people, you know, and then I'm happy that I went through the hard shit of having to get through that so that now I can reach this place. Because I struggle to find people who have a truly healthy relationship to weed. Like I know there is some examples and stuff out there, and I've met some people, you know, and it's like, oh, and it's really impressive. Like, have you ever met somebody? It's like you can just tell they're very like not addicted to it, can approach it, enjoy it, and then put it down. It's like, dude, the fucking willpower on you. You know what I mean?
Just Joe Rogan, I think, from what I've seen.
Yeah, but even him, I wonder sometimes, you know, because like he has definitely gone through periods of, I think, overconsumption and then having to go through this cycle himself too. I remember an episode he talked about like, you know, he was like, I talk about weed and stuff a lot, you know, and I definitely like, you know, think it's beautiful. He's like, but I think people lose themselves to it a lot too. You know, I was like, oh shit, Joe, like that's, you know, that's interesting. That's your take on it.
Yeah. Any heavy weed user probably knows that at least on some level, they recognize that it can get out of hand pretty quick because all these psychedelics are way more powerful than us, and weed's no different. Even though it's like less of a barrier to entry, or it's less harsh, and it doesn't necessarily shoot you off into the astral realm for 12 hours always. But yeah, it could be just as crazy, and it can definitely consume you. It could be a very powerful tool for channeling your energy, but it can also take over and suck all the energy out of your life. And just like what we're talking about with the shame of it all, and just like that constant burden of, how am I going to ensure that I have a constant supply of this? Because now it is essential for me being a human, at least in my own mind right now, and that's a problem.
Yeah. And it's like I said earlier, it's like you get to a point you're just fucking smoking to fight off withdrawal symptoms. At least that's where I got, you know. And I don't know if you ever watched the episode. It's an old one, but one of the first people I had on my podcast like a year ago was Forrest Stevens. This dude from Canada, super sweet guy. I love him to death. And he spent a year at his homestead, like really diving into his own psyche. And a big part of that path for him was meditation, mushrooms, and then very large doses of cannabis, you know? And it was funny because like I would consume his content and check up on him every now and then and stuff. And I saw him go through a similar cycle of, you know, he was having these experiences with cannabis that were, you know, from what I was witnessing, seemed like, you know, a lot of them were introspective and probably even beneficial. And he even just put out a book. No shit, I have it right here. This is crazy.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Tripping.
That's
yeah,
so
Writings on Life While Tripping by Forrest Stevens. Go check out his book, people, on Amazon. But he's, you know, he jot down a bunch of his, you know, notes he took in his psychedelic states. But I watched him go through this cycle, man, of he was exploring himself with it. And then he released this video one day about like how he quit weed or something like that. And it went through that, you know, and he dove into it too of like, yep, like I was, you know, I had to reevaluate my relationship. And so it's, yeah, it's interesting. And like I said earlier, man, I think that it is glorified in this certain way, and there's not that real education about it. Like that's one thing that I've thought of with like my own son, you know, is like whenever I was coming into my being around drugs, the education I got from my parents was honestly like awful. I love my parents to death and honor and respect them to the grave, but dude, like they had no fucking grasp on drugs. They're alcoholics, you know what I mean? They still are, and they saw, you know, but their relationship to like that, their son smoking weed was like, don't let us catch you where you're going to be grounded for 2 months. And so I turned into this very rebellious teenager of like, fuck you guys. Like,
right.
I didn't even really want to do this thing, but now I'm going to do it because you told me I can't, you know? And so, yeah, dude, I got off on it. Oh, with my son, you know? And so, and really like where that led me, man, was this like path of like figuring it out on my own through trial and error and putting my own feet to the fire and having no one to really relate to with this. The only people I had to relate to were like other fucking 14-year-olds who were like, no, I don't smoke weed, or like, yeah, weed's awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the resources I had, and maybe like Psych Substance on YouTube, but let's be honest, he doesn't really I mean, I don't know the harm reduction side, you know.
He's trying.
But anyways, but you know, so it's really important to me, man. Like I when my son is coming to age, I'm going to have a very honest conversation with him. It's not going to be the conversation of don't do drugs, you will be punished. It's going to be like, hey, dude, there's a reason why human beings do drugs, and they can be very enjoyable and even beneficial, and I'm not going to like stop you from doing that. You know what I mean? But also, hey, up front, like, you know, I have been through this shit. Here's the downfalls, and here's the pitfalls, and here's a place you can get your, like, really go into detail with him, not on the spiritual side of things, on the neurobiology of things. Like, I think that that's what people need. And like, I'm, you know, it's really important to me that like he receives that sort of honest education when it comes to that.
Right. And it's hard because it's so incredibly complex, because humans, like, one of our main functions in life is altering our state of consciousness all the time. That's all we do all the time, whether you want to accept it or not. You're altering your state of consciousness, whether it's drinking a cup of coffee or even going outside and getting the warm sun and fresh air. You're altering your state of consciousness. You're releasing endorphins. You're having a better experience because you're outside, grounded in the earth. Like, there's everything that even when you're turning up your air conditioning, you're literally altering your state of consciousness and your reality around you. And I know that sounds like way over engineering the simplicities of life, but that's what it is. That's what our human experience is. And that's why it's so complicated when you tell people, well, you can't alter it using this, or you shouldn't do it that way. It's like, well, what are you drinking right now? What are you doing right now? Why are you out in the sun? You're altering your state of consciousness. Yes. Why are you judging my method of doing it because I like it this way? And so it is really complex when you have a bunch of people who don't consider that. They don't, whatever they're comfortable with doing, that's normal, right? That's not altering your state of consciousness. That's just caffeine. That's just nicotine. That's just, okay, well, in my worldview, I don't introduce those things to my body, so that would be altering my state of consciousness, but people don't consider that. So it is I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but that is like a thing that kind of frustrates me, where it's not that I'm advocating for anything, but it's just we have to have an honest conversation, exactly like you said, with our children, with other people, and recognizing that is a part of human beings, is altering our state of consciousness. It's not just humans, like a lot of animals do it. Like what the dolphins are getting fucked up on jellyfish, right? Like it's a universal thing that we alter our state of consciousness. It's almost like essential to having higher consciousness is to fuck with it, right? So it's our right to do that. That's the fun of it. We just have to like learn how to navigate it, is the appropriate way of conceptualizing it.
Yeah, dude, I love that point, because this brings me to something I've been thinking a lot about lately, is these sort of traps that people fall into in terms of like whatever external stimulus it is that provides some sort of internal feeling. Do you see what I'm saying? And if they fall into these traps with that, like, okay, so one reason why I've been thinking about this a lot lately is my parents are really into traveling. Right? They really like to travel. They like to go on vacation. And I understand that to a certain level in the experiential side of things, but and I've had this kind of conversation with them, but where a lot of that stems from is it gives my parents an excuse like once or twice a month to be able to go down to Florida and day drink for 4 days on end. You know what I mean? And that sounds mean, but like where this is stemming from is like they are trying to produce some sort of feeling inside themselves. And so they've dressed it up in all these different fancy ways, with like being on a beach in Florida, away from like responsibilities and alcohol in my system. There's my happy place, you know? And like, dude, that's not where I want to be in life. I want to be able to sit on my goddamn couch right here, or like on a fucking park bench, and be happy, like be blissful. And selfishly, I want that for selfish reasons, so I can experience that, but also because I take a lot of pride in showing up for the people that I love in my life in an optimized way. You know what I mean? Like whenever I'm firing on all cylinders, whenever I'm experiencing some peace about myself, I notice that the people I interact with and things like that, it's like, oh, I get to like kind of like share this with you. You know what I mean? And so I think people fall into these traps, whether that be with like travel or fucking drugs, or sex or whatever other external stimuli, and they identify themselves with like, that's the thing that makes me happy. And I'm not saying don't experience those things in the fullest in this life, fucking express yourself and tap into that. But also, like, be honest with yourself and be wary of those traps, because I'm watching my own parents go through this cycle of, like, they stress themselves the hell out with their own business and stuff, generating all this income just to, like, blow it constantly on fucking vacations and shit. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Right.
You guys are living in this cycle of being stressed the hell out for this, like, 3-day window of, like, everything's okay, you know?
Right.
And it's like they can't see through it. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I just think that, and the reason why I started thinking about that more is because I just went on a work trip to California, and like that was fun for me, because like I haven't gotten to travel in a while, and like I haven't gotten to travel like in the past few years and stuff a lot, and you know, Cali's fun and stuff, and I enjoyed it, and like I tapped into that, like, hey, I'm here in California, like I'm gonna enjoy this, you know, and stuff. But like, truth be told, man, like I was realizing while I was there, on the way back, it was like, dude, like this is an illusion. You know what I mean? Like I can be just as fucking happy, if not happier, like being with my kid. Like truly, like that shit's unmatched. You know what I'm saying? Like, in being with my kid while I'm healthy and like while he's healthy, dude, like there's no other fucking place in this universe, I think, that like gets better than that. Like it truly, like, and people have this idea of heaven and hell and it being this after thing. Sometimes I think that heaven and hell is like the duality exists on this planet, and like this life is either going to be like hell on earth or heaven on earth. And you know, when I am with my kid in an optimized state, and I know that he's also like happy and healthy, like goddamn, dude, like that is heaven to me. You know what I mean? And so, like, why would I spend all this time and energy and stress myself out to get myself out to Florida or California or whatever it is to have that drink on the beach because that's my happy place? It's like, no, dude, maybe what you need to do is really spend some time doing the internal work, you know, so you don't need like all this external stimulus. Not saying you can't experience and appreciate the external stimulus, but if you find that to be the source of your happiness, you've lost the game, because that shit is like, it comes and goes. You are never going to be able to consistently always produce that with something. It is always going to be this fainting thing, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I totally agree. There is literally nowhere else I'd rather be than with my own immediate family. Like, there is nowhere else to be, but that is hard. People are constantly chasing outside of themselves. Also, I love what you said about the heaven and hell being merely a perspective of the dual nature of our reality, right? I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it reminded me of a comment that someone left on one of the videos I had made recently about like a channeled astral experience I had with Alan Watts and some of the things that he was teaching me. And one of the guys commented on my video asking me if one of the next times I go into this astral realm, if I could try and channel a message or get some communication out there, asking about World War III and the best way to like preserve your life and the preservation of human life and things like that. And, coming from just like a big place of fear. And I responded to him like, dude, like if you want to live in a reality where World War III happens and everything goes nuclear and everyone's dying and suffering under tyranny, you'll live in that world. You keep giving all your energy to it, you'll be there. You'll quantum shift to that fucking timeline. You keep watching news about Putin and Ukraine and climate change or whatever it is. You give your energy to it, you create that reality. And so I don't need to go in and channel a message asking about this, because I don't live in that world. I don't know anything about that stuff because I don't give it any of my energy anymore. And every day I wake up in a new reality that's a little bit closer to the more beautiful one that I see inside of me. And it's slowly, step by step, shifting into that world where I find myself surrounded by a panel of people who all are taking psychedelics and have this, crazy reach of an audience, and they want to actually, consider my perspective on things. Like I'm constantly waking up in a world that's just a little bit closer to the one that I want to manifest, and that's literally all it takes. Is just where do you put your energy? That's what will happen. if you don't want a nuclear bomb to go off, then stop fucking talking about it. Like, turn the channel. That's all it is. So I don't even know how I got on that tangent, but yeah, whatever you said reminded me of that comment, and I was just like, yeah, man, you just don't live in fear. Just focus on the happy stuff, and that's what your life will be like.
Yeah. No, I just put out a tweet this morning, man, it was like a Twitter thread that I then like posted on Instagram, but the first tweet I said, like, tell me if you spot the pattern here. You know, if you think about school, right? It's like you obey or you fail. If you think about the government, it's like, hey, you obey or you go to jail. If you think about religion, it's like, hey, you're going to obey or you're going to go to hell, right? So like, truly, like, there is these systems set in place that are dependent on fear, and they are designed to control you. And so like, it is seeing through that shit and deciding, like, I am not going to live in fear, because it's like you said, man, if you really want to, oh dude, you can find endless things to be worried about and scared about, and we could literally build up the most perfect utopian society around somebody's psyche and consciousness and reality tunnel. But if their reality tunnel is focused on like the one dark thing or whatever it is, like, that is what their reality is going to fucking be.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is it's all real. It's all real.
Yeah.
If you want to live in a reality where the scientists at CERN are resurrecting demons, guess what? You'll probably eventually live in a crazy fucked up version of this weird multiverse where that's like closer to reality than where we are right now. I fully believe that is like an aspect of our universe, is this multidimensional version where it's kind of even like without like completely moving free of an axis. It's just free range all over the place. In every direction you can shift into a different version of time and space and live whatever kind of reality you want. I think that's a lot of the Akashic records, a lot of the past life regression stuff is tapping into those concepts, because there's no time isn't real. That's an illusion. So there's only now. And if there's only now, then there isn't a past life. There's just lives that you're tapping into right now in some weird fucking alternate reality.
Yeah. So, what really trips me out about what you just said about that, I remember whenever I was in prison, I read this book. It was basically like quantum physics for dummies, you know? But it was talking about what you were just saying about like how there really like there is only the now, right? And this idea of like, well, I know what happened in the past because I have a memory of what happened, and like all those events coincide with where I'm at now, right? But then they introduce the idea of like, okay, so what if, you know, say theoretically we just randomly time shifted into this crazy alternate reality, both you and I right now, right? The universe could present us with these memories where we're fucking convinced, like, oh yeah, I've always lived in this reality. Like, this is how things happened. I remember this happened when I was a kid. You know what I'm saying? And for people who thinks this sounds like wacky and bullshit, this is a real human phenomenon. It is called false memories, right? And like, please, the audience Google this, because this is a deep rabbit hole that kind of tripped me out, is how solidified certain memories will become in your brain that like didn't happen. And like this happens all the time. Like human beings,
didn't
like,
it, though?
Here's how this event. Do what?
Did it? Or did you come from the reality where that happened? That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Is that like our understanding of time, and like it's not linear, it's not any of those things, and reality isn't fixed either. They're like, it's similar. The similar rabbit hole, kind of a parallel rabbit hole, is the Mandela effect, along with false memories. It's just a different way of conceptualizing it. And I think there's even another term called retconned or something like that, where it's basically a Mandela effect, but it's specifically talking about the relationship to like the magnetic field of the planet, and that is a cause for these changes and shifts in our memories. I think that there's a lot of deeper explanations than people normally give consideration to, where I think that it might be more realistic that we all are building our, like, if we are truly God, building our own realities individually, then your memory is your reality. Like, that, what are you talking? You can't deny me. Like whatever is in my memory that I'm conjuring up with my energy, that literally fucking happened in my past, quote unquote. So like even like things like photographs and stuff like that are sometimes stray from the collective human conscious memory of a thing. What the fuck does that mean? Yeah. That means that our realities are shifting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. And then this opens up a whole nother bag of like, okay, you know, if I'm feeling into this and intuitively feel like that there might be something to this, all of these modalities, whether that be psychedelics or meditation, and you know, different ways that people point themselves into a reality that they want to exist in and manifest up. It really blows open those doors for you of like, oh shit. Like, okay. And then you start to experiment with it. You start to experiment with it and you start to like put some of these practices in place. You're like, my life is changing weirdly. And everybody else who's doing this says the same thing.
Okay. So you want to talk about points of shifting, right? And ways that you can consciously recognize a shift. One of the big ways that we shift is in sleep, right? That's like why sleep is so revered in ancient cultures. Like that is a huge mechanism. Is every time we astral travel, whether through meditation or sleeping, that is a way that we facilitate these quantum shifts in our reality. Another way that you can kind of step through portals to different timelines is through natural disasters like major storms. And you'll feel that weird electrical magnetic shift in energy before and after a huge rainstorm or flood. And like I think that is one of the things that started to become a part of my understanding with this weird, you know, shamanism interest, is this understanding that these timeline shifts are happening after a major storm. That's why things feel a little different afterwards. Like if you think about the butterfly effect, right? What are the implications of that much rain, that many rain droplets affecting the leaf patterns of every plant and organism in our area? And like you're changing so many things, so many different little interactions that are totally different now because a storm came in and the leaves blew a certain way now, and now the animals are going to go a different path. Like you're totally shifting timelines every time the planet goes through something like that. And maybe that is like a little too far out there, or not. I haven't honed in my understanding yet of this, but that is one thing that has kept coming up to me, and it seems to kind of resonate in a weird way where it's like that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, and with all of this too, let's say theoretically, all of it's bullshit. Time really is, and again, this is theoretical. It's just a thought experiment. Let's say time is this linear thing, like we kind of perceive to experience it as. Even if that is the case, you know, with all of these manifestation things and all of that, you know, ways that you can step into an alternate reality. Even if that's all bullshit and there's no sort of like mystical shit going on, the idea of like pointing your mind in a certain direction and being like, well, you know, and then that unfolding into like, I'm gonna start taking steps in that direction. Like, you can't fucking tell me that's not gonna put you into a different reality, because at every single moment in your life, we are standing at this fucking nexus point of possibilities of ways that it could go. You know, like right now, if I wanted to, I could like, my sister lives next door. I could run over there and punch her in the face and then deal with the whole like family fallout, and everyone would be like, why the hell did Gabe do that? Like, I could step into that reality if I wanted to. Of course, I never would. You know what I'm saying? Because I love that girl. But
is that a timeline shift? To what degree is the nuance of this? I don't know. But I think you're onto something. I think you're onto something where like our concepts of time aren't as mundane as we'd like to believe they are. And there's weird shit like that just have these weird domino effects. And I think that sleep and storms and these like kind of laws of nature might be a part of what's dictating that.
Yeah, and I really love the sort of intersection that happens with everything that we're talking about in psychedelic drugs, because people, not everybody has experienced this, but a lot of psychonauts have experienced the sort of feelings of like, oh, it was like super short but also infinite at the same time. Like time didn't exist in there, or like, right. You know, I felt like I was time skipping in my, you know, ketamine trip or my mushroom trip, you know. And whenever you have direct experiences like that, Because that's what it is. You're feeling it. You're experiencing it. When you have those direct experiences, it really kind of resonates with you and leaves you feeling like, yeah, I don't think our monkey brain fully understands what's going on. As a matter of fact, our monkey brain did probably kind of evolve to like keep this skin suit thing alive and adapt to our environment, and I love, I forget fucking what book it was, but it's talking about psychedelics and altered states of consciousness, and what it was saying is that, your life, like your sober consciousness, like is essentially this massive hallucination, because it's a matter of you're receiving this insane amount of inputs at every single second, like all these inputs, and your brain's function is to filter out an insane amount of that, like a very large amount of that, to give you the information that you need that's like critical to survival and interacting with your environment, so yeah.
Sometimes you should just turn it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I hate to end the conversation because we always get such juicy shit. My son's gonna be home any minute, and he's gonna rip these lights down. So I gotta go turn this back into a living space again.
Absolutely, brother. But I appreciate you. Let the audience know where they can find your shit, man.
Oh yeah, I'm Jake. My YouTube channel, TikTok channel is all under the same thing. JakeKnowsNothing. And the thing I'm promoting right now is just my email is Jake Reads Something, which you can find in the links of my channels and stuff. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me, obviously like drop comments and shit, but send me an email, like give me some juicy details of whatever the fuck's happening to you, so I know that I'm not the only crazy one. And I'll just be documenting all the weird astral alien shit that I'm doing on my YouTube channel.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks, brother.